Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're just getting started here. We're getting our speakers to join the Twitter space. Thank you so much. My name is Lauren Chadwick. I'm the managing editor of our My Europe EU Affairs vertical. So we're just going to get started as we see our speakers are starting to join our Twitter space. Just as a reminder to everyone who's speaking, if you could keep yourself on mute, and then when I'll ask a question, I'll tell you to unmute yourself. So if everybody could keep themselves on mute. Also a reminder to our speakers to accept the invitation. You should receive an invitation pop up in the top of your screen, and you should accept the invitation when you see the invitation pop up in the app. So again, my name is Lauren Chadwick. I'm the acting managing editor of My Europe, and I'm just waiting for our speakers to join. Great, so I see at least two of our speakers have joined. So just waiting on two other people to accept, and we'll get started. So hello again, everybody. My name is Lauren Chadwick. Again, I'm the acting managing editor for My Europe, which is our EU Affairs vertical. So we wanted to host this conversation today because this past week has been EU Mobility Week, which ended yesterday with the World Car-Free Day. Euronews has been covering the topic of sustainability and transportation throughout the week. And here at My Europe, our EU Affairs vertical, we wanted to discuss how European cities are using what methods they're using to adapt their transportation and to attempt to reduce the presence of cars. Is this easy, and what are the challenges to doing this? That's what we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to put those questions to those who are at the forefront of this work. So feel free to tweet us your questions. If you have any questions for our listeners, for our speakers, you can tweet them to Euronews, and our social media editor will be collecting questions that we'll put as well to our speakers. So I see almost all of our speakers have joined. So we're in a pretty good place. So I wanted to, to start, I wanted to actually, I'll introduce our speakers first. So today we have Graham Keeley, who's a reporter based in Spain, who recently covered this topic for Euronews, looking into what Spanish cities have been doing to reduce cars. Then we have Valentin Lungenstrass, who's the deputy mayor in Lyon, France, in charge of mobility and also a metropolitan area councillor. Then we have Carmen Duce, the Spanish coordinator for the Clean Cities campaign. And I see Carmen, if you're listening, yeah, she's joined as a speaker, so we have everybody. And then we have Vincent Liéger, who's the author of the book Degrowth, and also co-founder of Cargonomia, an association that encourages cycling in Budapest, Hungary. So thank you all for joining us, and I see everybody has joined, so we're ready to go. Carmen, I wanted to start with you. Maybe can you tell us what's happening in Spain? There's a new climate law, so can you talk to us a bit about what cities are doing to reduce the presence of cars? And just a reminder to unmute yourself. Unmute, yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So thank you very much for the invitation, and thank you for organizing this conversation. Well, in Spain, last year in 2021, the parliament approved a law, the climate change law, with a lot of challenges, and one of the challenges is that all the cities with more than 50,000 inhabitants, compulsory, they have to establish low emission zones before 2023. So now, right now. This is the mandate. It's established in the climate change law, and also, well, there's a big opportunity now because there's like 1.5 million of euros coming from the recovery fund of the European Commission to improve and to promote and to facilitate the cities to make these changes. Well, that's the good news. The bad news is that the cities
Mm-hmm.
are quite slow, and well, there's a lot of challenges, but we can talk about this later if you want.
Yeah, yeah. I was just going to ask you. So, what do you think? Do you think is the role of the car in Spain? What do Spaniards think about? Are people attached to having their car?
Yeah, the cars right now they are occupying a lot of space in the cities and a lot of space also in the head of the people because uh, the truth is that here in Spain the cities are quite compact. They are not so extensive as, for example, in other countries. There's a lot of buildings with apartments. So the 15 minutes cities, they are real right now. There's the most part of the cities, in the most part of the majority of the cities, 50% of even more, 60% of the daily journeys, we made them just walking. So our cities in Spain are very walkable. But anyway, still we have problems of bad air quality. Madrid and Barcelona, and the most Madrid, they have a big problem with pollution, but also with climate change. We have suffered this summer 7 heat waves, really awful, and we have problems with noise. And that's very clear the link between noise and mental diseases, and well, of course, this public space occupation. So we think in the Clean Cities campaign and the organizations that we made part of the Clean Cities campaign, we think that it will be not so difficult to remove cars of the Spanish cities, but still there are some difficulties because there's this cultural hegemony that that you need a car, but that's not true.
Mm-hmm. And I wonder, Graham recently covered this exact topic for Euronews. So I wanted to ask you, as someone who living in Spain, what's kind of your view in the people you spoke about who are attempting to pedestrianize their cities? Kind of what were you hearing from people about the difficulty or the challenge in doing so, and how people living there feel about it?
Yeah, always the first reaction of people and neighbors with pedestrianization is like, oh, wow, but this is maybe it will be very bad for the local economy, for the small business, for the shops. But that's still it's not true. There are a lot of experiences, and of course, we go shopping. We make shopping walking, not with the car. So
Mm-hmm.
the streets that already there are pedestrian is
Mm-hmm.
now pedestrian. They are very vibrant streets with a lot of shops, with cafes, bars, and we can see it, for example, in little cities as Pontevedra, which is the main example. The city council there in Pontevedra 20 years ago did decide to make a more or less car-free city. Still, there are cars
Mm-hmm.
there, but only the necessary traffic, they said. And it's a very a lovely city with a lot of people. It's one of the cities that they have increased the population and not decreased because it's very active city, and we can see the same in Barcelona, for example, or in the cities where now the center of the cities is more walkable and more easy for stay there.
Mm-hmm.
So this is one of the things that at the beginning the people said, no, this will be chaos, but no, it's not.
And I wanted to bring in, so I'm going to bring in one of our other guests, Valentin Lungenstrass. You are in charge of mobility in the city of Lyon, France. And so I wanted to ask you, one of the measures that was brought in recently was this in March, the 30 kilometers per hour. And I was wondering if you could talk to us about the impact that that's had in the past couple of months, and if you could just unmute yourself to speak.
Yeah, hi everybody. Thanks for the invitation. Indeed, we have a quite bold program on the mobility transition in Lyon. We arrived, just for information for everybody, 2 years ago during the municipal elections, and so we are bringing up a bold program on all of the cases of mobility. So we're putting 2.5 billion on public transport, 500 million on active mode. So it's really something that needs to be seen in a systemic way to reach the goals that were previously mentioned. On the 30 kilometers, yeah, indeed, we brought them up in on 30th of March of this year. We were before at 36% of the city, what that was at 30 kilometers per hour max or less. Now we are at 84% of the city, so we just left some major axes of the city at 50 kilometers per hour. And so far, what we see, we didn't had the chance to get a full review yet of the process, but what we see is that cars, of course, slowing down. We have our local police that is daily doing actually 40 sessions of speed limit controls, of course, and we're seeing that cars are slowing down, which is a good point. And what we will do in the next month is to actually have a real a view on what it had on a very precise impact on speed, on accidents, on also noise, which was mentioned, which is a real problem, and has never been tackled actually really in cities, on air pollution also, and we are also engaged, of course, in low emission zones. So for now, we are having a positive point after 6 months of this press.
Great. And I wanted to now bring in Vincent Liegi, who is based in Budapest and has a cooperative, Cargonomia, which encourages cycling. Can you tell, we just heard from someone in Spain, we just heard from someone in France. Can you talk a little bit about what's going on in Hungary and how it's perhaps changed over the past decades that you've been there?
Yes, thanks a lot, Lauren. Hello, everybody. Thanks for welcoming me today. I'm very happy, even if I'm French, to speak about the situation in Hungary, because I think it's a very interesting country from a bike culture perspective. Hungary is, or used to be, I couldn't verify what the situation exactly nowadays, the third country about bike mobility in Europe, behind Denmark first and Netherlands. And it's very interesting in Hungary because it's a third position because you have two types of bike mobility and two different cultural approach about bike mobility. On one hand, you have a very strong, one of the biggest maybe in the world, bike movement in large cities of Hungary, like in Budapest, with the biggest critical mass that we organize every year, bringing together tens of thousands of bike demonstrators. There is a very strong bike culture, environmental culture in these large cities. The mayor is green. There are a lot of great improvements in the last year about bike mobility. And on the other hand, far away from these young people like me who are very happy to be liberated from the car and who are emancipating themselves in enjoying the freedom of riding bike or cargo bikes or whatsoever every day. The larger part of the bike mobility in Hungary is made in a different way in the countryside, where if you go to the Hungarian countryside, because of economic situation, people don't have enough money to buy a car. They would use their bike for daily businesses, to go to the school, to go shopping, to go to meet the neighbor, and so on. And what is very highly interesting to analyze here, it's how much it's a question of culture, because both are really good from an environmental point of view. I really believe they are very good from a convivial cultural point of view. To ride bike, it's a freedom, it's enjoyment of life, it's healthy, it's solving all the problems which were mentioned by Valentin and Carmen just before. But the people in the countryside face it with humiliation because in the same time, the car industry, through advertisement, is selling a picture that you don't have a beautiful car if you don't have the last SUV. You're a loser. You're not happy with family. You don't belong to this Western model of society which is self-destroying itself. And here in Hungary, the car industry is very strong. The German car industry is one of the biggest pillar of the Hungarian economy. And advertisement of cars are everywhere. And we are also unequal towards how much we are touched by this advertisement. And I really believe that the question about bike mobility is really a cultural question. And in this perspective, the advertisement, the marketing with a lot of lies, a lot of manipulation, as marketing is able to do, is playing a very toxic role. And the situation in the last 10 years, unfortunately in Hungary, changed a bit. I heard not so much that bike mobility in the countryside got lower through economic development and people making big loan, making themselves in difficult economic situation to buy cars and to reach this big lie of being happy through having a car, whereas the bike movement in large cities like Budapest keeps on going very beautifully.
I wonder if I could just ask you on top of that, you talked about a cultural kind of a cultural model where people want to have a car, but what about the convenience of the car? Because I think one of the big problems is convincing people that they don't need a car, especially people who may have good reasons to need a car, people who have lower mobility, older individuals, people who are disabled. How can they also be included so it's not unequal between people who are used to living in a city and have a very active lifestyle versus someone who might not be able to have the same lifestyle?
Yeah, the question is very highly important. So I am not saying that disabled people should stay at home because they cannot use their own bike and they are forbidden to use a car. So obviously, I'm not saying that. But also the Hungarian example with still a very good, strong public transport network all around the countryside, with still a lot of local shops and a lot of local public services all around in the countryside, is showing, which is something where in France in particular, we are very strongly attacked with the bike movement, things that are, but it's easy to use your bike when you live in the city center of Lyon or Paris. But we can see in Hungary that you can totally design the society organized around public transport, in particular with a very good train network or local buses and bike mobility. And then you can also add, and we are working a lot with our cooperative Cargonomia, a lot of very wonderful low-tech solutions for a very particular situation. With bikes, you can also have cargo bikes, which would help you to make your children happy to go to school. You can have type of cargo bikes or share bikes or trailer, where you can also help disabled people or elderly people to go shopping or to help each other to go shopping for them and to reinforce the local solidarities, to reinforce the interaction between the different types of generation and so on. Where you can see in large cities where speed is a dogma, where cars and highways in the city to make the cars be quicker and quicker, all these large cities through cars excluded the slower people, the children, the elderly people, the disabled people from the public spaces, because the public spaces are designed to be productive in this growth model of society. So through bike mobility and a change in paradigm, in mindset, you can parallelly reinforce the solidarities and provide much more safe and appropriatable spaces for people who are now facing a lot of troubles in this model of society.
So I wanted to bring in Carmen on this kind of topic of access. In more rural areas of Spain, I imagine you need a car for transport to transport food to areas that are more disconnected from public transport. What do you think can be done to address those concerns, people who really don't have access to public transport?
Yes, this is, I think, is one of the main challenges that we have now. Well, our campaign, the Clean Cities campaign, is addressed to cities, but yeah, of course, 45% of the people in Spain are living in rural areas, and in the last decades, we have seen a reduction, really very, very strong of the public, the buses, even the trains. Even this year, there's a new train line in rural areas which has been eliminated, and that's really the opposite, that the direction that where we have to go. It's very important to provide public transport and different means, maybe little buses, or for example, there are some experience in a very small village in the middle of Spain, in very rural areas, that the people are now organizing a system of share mobility, share cars, sometimes electric cars, but there's also a challenge because the charging infrastructure is not so well developed right now. But with share cars, there are some solutions. For example, in the north of Spain, in Galicia, the regional government established a system, a model of taxis for facilitate the doctors to arrive to the houses in the rural areas. So there we have to imagine different ways to solve this problem and to really allow the people to access to the health system, to the bank, because even the bank offices in the rural areas, there are a lot of bank offices now that they are closed. So it's very important to address this challenge, and it's one of the main important ones now, right now.
I wonder, Valentin, if you could, if I could bring you in. We talked a little bit about, we mentioned low emission zones, and I think one of the challenges is making sure that lower income families aren't, penalized in low emission zones for having older cars. So, what's kind of the plan in Lyon for not penalizing lower income families who have older cars when it comes to street parking, not charging them more for not being able to have a more climate, a more low emission car?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, maybe let's say again that low emission zones are, of course, to reduce air pollution, which is a major health threat actually in all of our cities. Let it be in France or in Europe or everywhere else in the world. But there is a huge challenge on social aspects, on really accompanying people so that they can make this transition. So what we set out as a goal in terms of health, in terms of air pollution, is in 2026 we want to get out of diesel cars in the city center in Lyon. So this is really the goal that we are aiming for, and we're currently building up our low emission zones progressively so that we are reaching this point to get diesel cars out of the city. But of course, we really do need to put programs on the way that really facilitate mobility for people. Actually, so the first part is really, and this is socially the best solution and the most efficient one, is to build up the alternatives to the diesel car, or to cars actually in general. So this is, as I said, putting 2.5 billion euros in 6 years on public transport, which is 3 new tramway lines, 1 new express bus line, renewing actually the bus network also, and the buses themselves. This is a major point. 500 million on active modes, and approximately 300 of these millions on our special bike network, which is fast bike network, which is secured, which is very comfortable. We're putting a lot of effort also in putting up car sharing solutions. We did that very quick in our at our term 1.5 years ago, really to give actually solutions to people that actually don't need a car day-to-day life, but actually they do need them because they need to go to, I don't know, IKEA sometimes. They need to see friends on a Saturday. They want to have a bigger grocery shopping, whatever. And then they need a car in some of these situations. We need to provide the solutions for the people. And another point is really to facilitate also carpooling actually and also on a day-to-day um, base actually, because we know carpooling to make 500 kilometers to go to Paris, I don't know, but we will also need to make it happen on a day-to-day basis. And this is really socially the most efficient because it's for everyone, and especially the public transport that we're developing is actually really going also into neighborhoods where there is poorer people, where people have less means, and especially in these times with the energy crisis, we really need to accompany these people. And the new tramway lanes will go to these neighborhoods and bring make a link between the city center to these neighborhoods, and also in a more going out of this radial shape of public transport. So this is really important, and we're putting up also new solidarity prices, so that we are actually also accompanying people depending on their wages, depending on their situation. If they're students, especially families, because we have a huge challenge that families with several kids actually can take public transport in an efficient way. This is very important for us. But of course, developing all these alternatives will not be a solution for everyone, because of course we are a big metropolis, 1.4 million inhabitants. We have hundreds of thousands of people coming in by car every day in the metropolis. So we need to also have other things on top of these alternatives. So we're putting up financial aids on top of what the French state is actually providing for those people who don't have an alternative even in 5 years, and which need a car, so that they can get a car that is less impactful on air pollution. So either be an electric car, which is the best solution because it also tackles problems on noise, on climate change, and this is an important factor. And the last thing that we're doing is that we're doing also temporary actually delays, so that people, depending on their revenue or on their situation, can actually have a delay, actually keep their car 1, 2, 3 years longer than actually what the low emission zone is doing.
We have a listener who wants to take part in our discussion, and it's an MEP from the Greens group. So I want to let her introduce herself and ask a question or speak or jump in to our conversation here.
Yeah, thanks for the floor. Hello from a train here in Lower Saxony. I'm in Germany. My name is Katrin Langsieben. I'm the Vice Chair of the Ample Committee for Social Affairs and person with disability. So why are people using the car? Because it is a safe space. When I'm traveling, I'm not traveling in train in Belgium because it's not accessible. When we are talking about sustainable mobility, it must be a mobility for all. So accessibility is created by law. And here I have to call on the train agencies, train companies, who's like Siemens, the company, is building wagons, and the wagons are mostly not accessible for wheelchair users. So that must be a model we should not put on the mobility in 21. So how accessible is the European Union? It's not accessible. How safe is it for women? It's not really safe. And here, when we are talking about sustainability, I would like to hear how women, elder people, and persons with disabilities are seen as clients and customers. And here I can sum up, we are not seen as clients and customers and that is what we really have to work on. Thank you.
Thank you. That's such an important perspective, and I want to put that to our other speakers. We've been talking a bit about how to prevent inequalities while discussing sustainable mobility. So thank you so much for joining our conversation. Carmen, do you want to talk about the Clean Cities campaign and how people in cities want to have fewer cars and the challenges of making sure that that's accessible, which Katrine just brought up?
Yeah, and I would like to say thank you, Catherine, for explaining this and pointed this question of accessibility and also the women, the gender vision, because I think all of us sometime in our life will have problems for accessibility. We can be, I don't know, we can break our leg or have some problems. And of course, we need to reorganize our cities for being accessible and safe for all. This is, I think, is one of the main things. And I was thinking, for example, a part of our campaign now, we are promoting and collaborating with a lot of families and parents in the schools, asking for clean air around the schools and open streets and school streets around the schools, because we think that, for example, children, at least in Spain, 30 years ago, the children, they walked to the school in groups without parents in a very autonomous way, because there were, at that time, 30 years ago, there were not so much cars in the streets and not so big cars in the streets. Now there are SUVs in the streets around the schools, and it's very problematic. And as parents, we are afraid that our children will have an accident or they can be injured by the cars. So in our campaign, we are promoting and collaborating with a really big network of families and schools, asking open streets and school streets in every school. And here in Spain, we are asking that why not define a low emission zone around every school, so all the children can just play in the streets and recover the space.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Carmen, for bringing that up. I'm going to come back to that topic with Valentin in a second. But I just wanted, Valentin, I wanted to get your reaction on what Katrine had to say. What do you? Can you come back to this topic of accessibility? How do you think? I know you're really think that cargo bikes it can be made accessible. Tell me about how important it is to engage with the community on this topic of accessibility.
Yeah, I think when we speak about accessibility, we should first speak about the accessibility for life on this planet. And the car industry and the car infrastructure, what we develop in this car model of civilization, is threatening the accessibility for life for the upcoming generation. So there is here an emergency first when we speak about accessibility to get out of this model of society when we got dependent, because when we speak also about accessibility, and it's what Valentin was mentioning, in a large city like Lyon, which is not so large, you have type of districts or type of precarious population who are cut from the rest of the society and so on. It's a choice of civilization, it's a choice of how we develop the cities, it's a choice of urbanism and so on. And when you first ask this question, which are really about how to redesign, how to rethink our ways of life, and also when we speak about mobility, we should also think, why do we move so much every day to do what? When you think about going to be stuck in a traffic jam, and whether you are in an electric car or a non-electric car, you're still blocking the traffic jam to go to make a stupid job, to produce things which are useless, to make a bullshit job, as David Graeber spoke about. It's nonsense. So speaking about accessibility, yes, we address that with our cooperative here in Budapest through mostly two main approaches. The first one is using a lot of different type of devices, which we can, in a low-tech approach, appropriate and co-construct together in around in the city and adapt to the different usage and the different particularities of people who face problem through cargo bikes, trailers, and so on. I can give you an example. When we have the critical mass, the blind people are also invited to join on tandem type of bike which can be shared by somebody else, and you go together and you can invite disabled people very easily to go by a cargo bike and to enjoy the city, to enjoy the space, to enjoy the conviviality what it creates to be together to do this type of things. And the second dimension is to fight against all the fake news and the manipulation coming for the car industry and advertisement. I mean, if we are serious about sufficiency and climate change, we should forbid immediately advertisement for cars. And on the contrary, to go to open debates and public deliberation about mobility and to educate the people. And it's what we do with schools, with companies, with municipalities, and so on, to go to show to the people what is a cargo bike and what you can do with a cargo bike, what kind of different type of devices you could use to make your life much easier in your everyday life and more autonomous. And very often, most of the people don't have any clue about the alternatives which are proposed. And there, I think it's an emergency question to reappropriate the narrative and to reappropriate the debates about what is meaningful life and what is mobility and accessibility in a meaningful life.
Mm-hmm. I want to come back to speaking about schools and the kind of place of children in schools, because I know in Lyon, for instance, one of the kind of first initiatives around pedestrianizing was to pedestrianize around schools. Valentin, I wonder if you could talk to us about the influence that has had in Lyon, and if you see kind of an impact. Are people happy with that initiative? Can you talk to us a bit about that?
Sure, with pleasure. I just wanted quickly to emphasize what Catherine was saying about especially accessibility and disabled people very quickly.
Absolutely, go ahead.
Because it is there are indeed exceptions in terms of low emission zones, in terms of parking, of course, for disabled people, because there is more use of car. But we should not forget to make these alternatives that do exist actually. To make them accessible, to make them really accessible. So actually we were talking about pedestrianization. So when you pedestrianize, when everything is at the same level, when you have an easy ground, this is making things easier for actually everybody, and also people in wheelchairs, people with walking sticks, etc. When you are at crossings, to lower the pavement so that at the crossing you're at the same level as the road, so that the crossing is easy, and this also for everyone, let it be in a wheelchair, let it be for elderly people. This is so important to have a special attention also on the maintenance of the lifts that are going down to the metro station, so that actually the lift is always working, or at least on the maximum of time. This is also important. And of course that the platforms on buses and trams are at the same level as the engine that is passing. So this is really important. And actually even on bikes, there are a lot of opportunities. We have a local firm in Lyon, which is called Benur, which is actually working on a kind of bike which can be used by disabled people, and especially in wheelchairs. So we really have a lot of things to do on that, and we should not forget to really develop these things. And this makes actually a good link with our school streets, which we call in Lyon kids streets, actually. We indeed in the 2 years developed a lot of them. We have now 64 schools, so kindergartens and primary schools, which are benefiting from this program. This is around 11,000 children. So 64 schools out of more or less 200 that we have in Lyon on these on kindergarten and primary. So we are building these streets, either pedestrianized or shared spaces at least, which we recompose and redesign to really, first of all, secure the mobility for the children themselves and for their parents, and especially to have a safe space around the school. So safe in terms of circulation, in terms of cars, of course, but safe in terms of pollution, in terms of everything. But what is interesting is that these projects really are so consensual. The parents, people that are, or everybody that is working in the school, so it'd be the teachers or the others, the kids themselves, the neighbors, everybody is actually, even in a pedestrianized scenario, which is cutting car traffic on some portions, are really happy about it, because it is giving space to kids, and this is quite positive for everybody, and is kind of um, lowering the fears that we were talking about at the beginning, that okay, the car the car will be different, the car flow will be different, you will have to turn left before, and you will have to make maybe 500 meters more on your journey, whatever. It's actually lowering that, because these are nice public space projects where we also use, of course, these projects to get on with greening the city, with planting trees, with actually working with the kids also to plant some things, to have actually also school projects that use these spaces also to, I don't know, grow things, actually, to make drawings in the street regularly. So this is very important. But the second point is not only security for children, is that we have a concept that our mayor, Gregory Doucet, is really putting forward, and it's not only touching public space, but a wide variety, actually, of subjects, is what we call children's city, if I translate it. Children's city is really the principle that you design the city so that a child can really, well, use the public space, have easy ground, as I said, but also in a museum to have I don't know, the paintings on a lower level, so that it is adapted to children. But what it means behind that is also that when you really design things, having in mind that children are amongst the most vulnerable in public spaces, especially, then you also design a more safe and more comfortable public space for everybody. So not only children, but for all people that are vulnerable in public space, but in the end, actually for everybody. And so this is the concept that we're developing behind Children's City.
So as we kind of wrap things up here, I wanted to go back and talk about part of adapting cities, adapting the countryside, is also the political will and the will of people to do so. And so I wanted to bring back in Katrine on this topic. Is there political will to adapt cities, make them more accessible while also more sustainable?
We have, first of all, the UN Convention of Persons with Disabilities, so make our society accessible. And here, of course, in the sector of mobility, we in the Parliament fought for more rights and flexibility when it comes to passenger rights. Unfortunately, in the trilogue, the companies of trade agencies fought against us. Persons with disabilities are still forced to apply for assistance to get into trains 2 or 3 days before they want to travel. If there's no assistance, they can't travel. So you want to, for example, you want to visit your family for Christmas and there's no assistance to get you into a train, you can't see your family. Full stop. That's reality. And that's against human rights law. That is against what we are fighting for. So the passenger rights trilogue was unfortunate. We have the EU strategy on persons with disabilities rights. We are waiting for the Commission proposal on the EU disability card. Can I travel wherever I want to? How accepted is it? Here I want to have clear proposals from the Commission when it comes to the EU card. I can't travel with my disability card in France or wherever I want to. So persons with disabilities are not seen like citizens. They can't be flexible as non-disabled people, and that is the problem. And finally, I have maybe a disability card, but if the trains are not accessible because the train agencies buying wagons built by Siemens, and I call that company Siemens, they are building wagons who are not accessible. Actually, it should be not allowed to buy any wagons who are not accessible. Full stop. What is the point? And we do have, from the parliament side, clear positions, but the member states have to transfer it. And the member states and the companies must see persons with disabilities as clients, and that's not the case. Unfortunate. That's from my quick side.
Thank you so much. It's such an important point. So thank you for bringing it up. And so on the member state side, Carmen, what do you think is there political will in Spain to make cities more sustainable and more accessible?
Well, I think, yes, there's a will and there's a population will also. Recently, we have published a survey that shows that more than the 60% of the respondents will approve, will be in favor of one car-free day per week in the cities. But what we are seeing now is that the changes are too slow, and we don't have time. We need just to face the climate emergency, the pollution, the noise. We have a lot of problems. We know the solution, and the cities are being now very slow. Here we have local elections in the next year, in 2023, in May. And we are afraid as campaigners that the cities, the mayors, we will have some doubts about make radical change in the cities. So, our debate now is to convince the candidates and the mayors that this is something that the population need, and the population will support also. And it's not so difficult to make the change because, as I said before, there's a lot of people walking already, and our cities are compact, and we have the possibility, we have the opportunity, and and we have the need to do it. So there's a will, but it may be a lack of ambition, and we have to face it.
Katrin has her hand up, so I'll just let you. Why don't you intervene once again quickly?
Yeah, very quickly. Thanks, because I'm here in the middle of nowhere. Internet would be wonderful having in the train. I think when I heard from member states the vision of persons with disabilities, why should persons with disabilities travel? And we have kind of disability transport. It's a way of ableism, and that is what we have to name it very clear. When it comes to the question why persons with discrimination background are not traveling in a public transport because of discrimination, because of punishing or bullying, and in that case of ableism, to see it very, very clearly here in that room. And that is what we really have to debate on, have to focus on who's been seen as a client and who are not. Thanks, and I have to log out.
Thank you for joining.
Thanks for the space so much. And if you have further questions, please get back to me.
Vincent, I want to bring you in on this topic. Do you see the political will and also the will of people to learn more and to adapt their lifestyles?
To learn more, for sure. There are also converging surveys all around Europe, and in particular in France, showing that now we reach a majority of population who are aware about the challenges of the 21st century. I think the summer we all faced in Europe frightened a lot of us and opened a lot of debates, a lot of discussion, and the mindset of a lot of people. The upcoming energy crisis is also pushing for more debates on this type of discussion what we have today. I see a behavior change, in particular in France, as an old bike activist in Paris. When we were, I remember the time 15 years ago, we were trying to block Champs-Élysées and we were 20, civil disobedience action, and we ended up in police station, and nobody really cared about bike mobility in the city center of cities. And it's wonderful to see Paris or Lyon facing in the last 2-3 years a type of paradigm or cultural change toward bike mobility and so on. So there are a lot of dynamics in the society showing that people are willing to open the debate and change their behavior. The public political discussions are also more and more opening these debates. If you listen to President Macron in France and his government, so the main word is about sobriété, which can translate it by sufficiency. But the problem is that it's not followed by anything significant. So we speak, and we don't really put on the table the right question, and we don't really implement the right modification. I already spoken about forbidding marketing for car, for everything. How can we speak about sufficiency seriously if in the same time after the speech of the Prime Minister or the President about sufficiency, calling everybody for consuming less, you face 5 minutes or 10 minutes of advertisement, manipulating your brain to consume always more? How can we speak about sufficiency seriously in a model of society which is organized around growth, where to do less is not making growth? And in the growth model of society called capitalism or neoliberalism, it ends up with recession, and we know the terrible economic and social impacts of recession in our societies. So we need to open the debate in a very transversal and economic and political way to understand the challenge we face. And last point I wanted to deal with you, because our cooperative is also about local food production and how to give accessibility to everybody to a seasonal, organic, regenerative type of agriculture food. We do it with cargo bike, we do it with permaculture, agroecology. But when we speak about accessibility and whoever we speak about, so to all, it's a question on how we redesign the way we occupy the spaces. And we see some surveys also showing that people want to leave large cities to go back more to the countryside. So how we reorganize the large cities to make them again edible, to bring back some biodiversity, to make them accessible for all, not only with cargo bikes, but in general, accessible for surviving, and how we revitalize the countryside to make it accessible for all as well. So it's really deep political transformation what we have to implement, and I really believe, and we could see that through a type of processes like the Citizen Convention for Climate in France, through more direct democracy, through more deliberative type of democratic tools. I think we can achieve quite a lot in radical transformation of our society to stop being the hamster in the wheel, to run always quicker, to produce more, to work more, and of course to transport ourselves more without any meaningful means behind.
Mm. And just to finish up, Valentin, what is it challenging when we're talking about reducing cars in the city and the political will to do so, but also getting people on board? Obviously, changes to reducing the number of cars in the city leads to more traffic jams trying to get into the city, and it's more difficult to drive in the city. It's more difficult to transport things in the city. How do you address that from the perspective of the city and the metropolitan area?
Let's be very transparent. Yes, it is challenging, and yes, it is difficult. Tackling climate change is a very huge challenge. Tackling air pollution is a huge challenge, and we really need to be very transparent with that. And as Vincent just said, in all European countries, if you do polls, people are concerned about climate change. What we see in cities when we implement precise things, when we go into detail, into very specific things, we notice that this link between this global concern and the very actions that are needed is not always directly made. So we need to be very transparent that the challenge is huge, and we need to make really profound changes. And if we get back to transport is, well, more or less 1/3 of greenhouse gas emissions in different territories. It is a major part of air pollution. It is taking up 60-70% of space in cities and in areas. So yes, the solution is also to tackle transport, to tackle it in a bold way. So we need in the next years basically to have a massive degrowth of greenhouse gas emissions. So also on transport. And so we need to not only put up alternatives, but as you just said, indeed, to when you put up bike lanes in a narrow space, because our cities in Europe are, most of them, narrow. When you also want to green your city, when you want to pedestrianize something, when you want to actually enlarge a pavement, well, you're taking up space on the car. And so we need to explain things, we need to accompany people, but we need to really do it in the fastest way possible, that is actually really at the right level with the stake of climate emergency, of air pollution. This is really important. And of course, let's be clear also, the solutions are not the same in rural areas and in urban areas. They're not exactly the same. It's not exactly the same scope. And of course, when we talk about walking, about cycling, about public transport, it's not the same when we talk about urban areas and in rural areas. But in all the places, there are solutions. And let's be transparent on something also. I think the solutions already exist. They need to be developed, they need to be improved, but the solutions already exist on the mobility transition. Let it be in rural areas or in urban areas. We don't need a technological breakthrough. We don't need a wow effect on I don't know what new transport mode, or to decarbonize something that would be like planes or private jets or something. We already have the solutions: better walking, better and more safe cycling, better public transport, shared mobility, electric mobility, and this needs to be implemented.
Well, thank you so much. To end on that note, thank you to all of our speakers for joining. I think it was an interesting conversation about sustainability and making it as well accessible to all. So thank you for joining us, and stay tuned. Euronews does Twitter Spaces at least once a week. So keep following on euronews.com and on our social media. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks
Thank you
a
very
lot,
much.
Lyon.
Thank you very much.